Eric Prince, in a conversation with Donald Trump Jr., just casually admits that the United States under Donald Trump is actively pursuing regime change in Venezuela.
There's sanctions. I'm glad they're tightening down on the nonsense of U.S. oil companies there. But it's ultimately going to have to be pushed out. And it doesn't require U.S. military. It can be covert action from the intelligence community or covert action from Venezuelan patriots helped by outsiders. Because ultimately, the Maduro regime has to know that there are consequences to staying, and that's absolutely the U.S. It should be U.S. policy because they're an absolute malign, extremely negative influence. Their military doesn't really believe them or doesn't really support them. A few punches to the face and they will go. And I can assure you, my friends in Venezuela, things are in process to push the Maduro regime out. Look, Maduro is wanted, and the U.S. raised the bounty to $25 million. And I want the Maduro team to realize all the other people that have had $25 million bounties on them, what is their status today?
Not so good?
Not so good.
Yeah.
They're either 6 feet under or they're in the bottom of the Indian Ocean, like Osama bin Laden. So it's not going to end well. Leave now and let the Venezuelan people breathe.
The fact that Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater, isn't rotting in prison because of the war crimes that his group committed in Iraq shows exactly how the United States is a morally broken society. Does anyone believe that Eric Prince and all these capitalist scumbags want to overthrow Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela because they want best for the Venezuelan people? If these people actually cared about Venezuelans, they would drop the sanctions and engage in trade in a way that would help Venezuela prosper. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world. That is why capitalists care so much about Venezuelan democracy. There is also a giant class war element to this. The West has been obsessed with enslaving Venezuela ever since the Hugo Chavez revolution. Remember, the West never ever forgives a state that refused to be put in shackles by Western capital. Nicolas Maduro is not a tyrant. The West just wants you to hate him and think that he's a tyrant because he has the audacity to oppose and resist United States imperialism.
That is somebody who has helped plan coup d'etat, not here, but other places. It takes a lot of work, and that's not what he did.
When we were talking about what is capable, what you need to do to be able to plan a coup, and you cited your expertise having planned coups.
I'm not going to get into the specifics, but
successful coups.
Well, I wrote about Venezuela in the book.
Pam Bondi is seeking the death penalty for Luigi Mangione after the death of the capitalist thug Brian Thompson. The United States doesn't even give the death penalty to pedophiles and rapists. Meanwhile, the ruling class wants to murder Luigi Mangione. Donald Trump has pardoned disgusting war criminals. The Trump administration cheers on Israel murdering children and welcomed the war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu with open arms. Meanwhile, they want to kill Luigi Mangione. The American ruling class is completely morally bankrupt. And the scary thing is, I'm not even sure that Luigi Mangione is the shooter. If you truly believe that the cops caught Luigi Mangione days later, chilling in a random McDonald's, wearing the same outfit and having every single piece of evidence that the prosecutors need, I have a bridge to sell you. In fact, Luigi Mangione's legal team asserts that the cops engaged in an illegal search and seizure, taking away Luigi's bag. You know, the same bag they found all the evidence in? Let's be real, the cops clearly planted this evidence on Luigi Mangione. So you telling me that this guy who looks nothing like the original footage that we've seen of the shooter just so happened to keep the murder weapon on him days later in a detailed manifesto explaining why he did it? A prosecutor's wet dream? I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. They couldn't find the original shooter, so they set up this guy Luigi Mangione, and they are planning to kill him simply to send a message to the masses to not dare rise up against the ruling class.
I gotta mute that part. I don't want to get demonetized. You know, our man Greg be putting in work. Big shout out to Greg, who helps me edit these videos at Hotspot. What's poppin', my friends? My family. We got another mid-afternoon banger. I like that. Banger after banger, indeed. It's great to be back. We had a great conversation with Alon Miserati yesterday. It's great to have him on. Now we have another amazing journalist and geopolitical analyst, Patrick Henningsen, who will be joining us. And this is, I have so many hotspot videos to show you, because even though I wasn't streaming over the last 2 weeks, I was still putting out these bangers. You guys know, I'm always in the lab cooking. Just because you don't see me on YouTube, I'm always in the lab cooking. So I have a lot of hotspots to like show you guys. They always get our videos, my hotspot videos always get us demonetized and flagged. But they don't when I play them as an intro to my streams, I learned. That's why I don't really post them no more, because they've been fucking our channel up. I be getting in trouble. Greg be getting me in trouble, I should say. But the mainstream media, they have committed malpractice with how they handle this story. The mainstream media is tampering the results of this trial. Big shout out to my friend Didi, who reminded me of this. So the mainstream media went radio silent on this story after they realized they couldn't manufacture consent for Americans to cheer the state execution of this guy. Once they realized that this guy had fan clubs and shit, they stopped covering it. And one thing that the mainstream media made sure not to cover was the fact that the police engaged in an illegal search and seizure of the guy they claim is the shooter, Luigi Mangione. And during this illegal seizure, and this is what the corporate media does not tell you, the police seized the bag that Luigi Mangione had. Why would he do that? And then once they got the evidence in, all of a sudden they had these planted manifestos, and the Luigi legal team is trying to get that thrown out because they're like, we don't have no idea what this shit is. Did the media tell you that? They set this guy up, man. So this guy was found 2 days later, same clothes, same murder weapon. What happened to people's critical thinking skills? This story doesn't make sense at face value. And then when you look at the memo, and I'm going to bring my guest in soon. Sorry, Patrick, I'm going to bring you in. But when you look at the manifesto, look at what it said. Where the manifesto praised the fucking feds. To the feds. I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial, some elementary social engineering. This is exactly what the prosecutors will want to see. This is exactly what the feds will want to see. And people are accepting this story at face value. He praised the feds. So the guy who is technical enough, who is smart enough, he tracked his CEO's movement. He knew exactly when the CEO did not have a security around him. He scoped this motherfucker out for days, learned the pattern of the security detail of this healthcare CEO, and executed this assassination to perfection and got away. So this guy is smart enough to do that, but he's not smart enough to get rid of the murder weapon in the same clothes that he'd wear days later. Like, come on, guys. Are we serious? And that's why the media have done malpractice, because they just condition people to accept the fact that this motherfucker is guilty. So there was an embezzlement trial that the CEO was a part of. There was people in the ruling class that wanted to get rid of the CEO, and they found some motherfucking patsy to pin this on. And people think I'm crazy because I have critical thinking skills. And another point I want to make as I bring my guest Patrick in is the point I made during the hotspot video for people who want to engage in moralism. Can't blame people for reacting in a violent way in a violent society that pardons war criminals. Donald Trump pardoned this guy, Eddie Gallagher, who tortured and executed children. He was so evil that he terrified the people around him. You know how hard it is to get a war crime charge on a U.S. soldier? They was like, hey, man, we got to get rid of this motherfucker. He's too crazy. Trump was like, all right, we're going to pardon this guy. You guys want to lecture us about this poor CEO who's a murderous scumbag himself? But all right, I ran enough. You guys know I like to start with a good intro. I have an amazing guest join us today. I follow your work. I've been on your show before as well. It's great to have you back on RBN, a geopolitical analyst, journalist, and host of the Sunday Wire, I believe. Thank you for joining us, Patrick Henningsen.
Great to be with you, Nick.
Yeah, I want to get your thoughts because I covered this yesterday with Alon, because I know you cover a lot of geopolitics. I want to get your thoughts on the Trump administration, but then cover how I think this is another pattern of the capitalist class trying to tank the economy so they can steal more wealth, just like they did during COVID 2008. But before we get to that, I want to get your thoughts on Trump's foreign policy, because now he's openly discussing bombing Iran. You have him bombing Yemen. He bombed Yemen's water supply. I got to find my tweet where I showed the receipt. But he bombed Yemen's water supply. He's bombing hospitals the same way that the IDF is doing. So I'll pass it to you. I know I talked a lot in the beginning, but I would love to hear your thoughts on the incoming Trump regime. Thank you for joining us once again, Patrick.
So thanks, Nick. I don't know where to start, quite frankly. It's an unmitigated train wreck in 4 different directions. They've came in on this kind of wave of optimism because, let's face it, if you campaign for presidency and you campaign on an anti-war message, you will get elected, because the majority of Americans actually they don't want to be involved in foreign entanglements. They don't want to see pointless wars, and it always works. It worked for George Bush Jr. It worked for Barack Obama. It worked for Trump 1.0. Biden, I'm not sure. He didn't really campaign, so we don't really know. So we just kind of like cancel that one out. But Trump 2.0 basically campaigned on an anti-war ticket. Said, I'm going to bring peace to Ukraine. We're going to stop World War III. I'm going to bring peace to the Middle East. Okay. They fumbled the ball pretty badly in Ukraine so far. It's not going anywhere. It's a mess. They don't look like they know what they're doing. Marco Rubio's run away. He's hiding in Guyana or something like that.
Yeah.
Just can't face the failures. And so with Gaza, Trump rode in like a knight in shining armor, peace in the Middle East. I mean, wow. Biden couldn't do it, but Trump could. And sure enough, not less than 2 months after, it's completely broken down. Israel has basically bolted from the ceasefire agreement with the full endorsement of the White House. Yep. So that tells you something. It's very, very interesting here. If that was genuinely a ceasefire deal, Trump and Steve Witkoff and his teams would have been up in arms. They would have been irate at Netanyahu. They would have been in the public shaming him like he shames Zelensky. But what this shows you is that was not a real ceasefire deal. That was a pause to give Israel time to rearm, to continue their policy of genocide and ethnic cleansing. The ethnic cleansing part is not a secret anymore. It's openly stated by the Israeli officials. Netanyahu said it just yesterday. Trump has also stated this openly about, migrating the Palestinians out of Gaza. Okay, so this whole thing has collapsed. It's a ruse. Now they're basically they're probably going to blow it in Yemen as well. Just being involved in a war in Yemen is a bad look, because Obama and Trump 1.0, Biden, they all tried it for 8 years. It was a failure for Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia lost tons of money and jeopardized their own security. So now it's Iran. Now to the next one. Trump is threatening Iran. We're going to preemptively bomb you. Preemptively. Right. If you don't come to the table and negotiate a new nuclear deal like the one that I tore up in my first term in May of 2018, the JCPOA, they had a nuclear deal. Trump, on the orders of Netanyahu, destroyed it. Yeah. And with Mike Pompeo was the kind of head stooge for Tel Aviv at the time, who was posing as our Secretary of State. And he basically, on the orders of Netanyahu, convinced Trump, as well as the Israel lobby, to get rid of that. So that brought the region closer to a war. And so all this talk about Trump as a peace president is completely a canard. He also, you know, they say, oh, he didn't start any new wars in his first term. Yes, he did. He put boots on the ground in Syria.
Yes. Yes.
And that are still there to this day. So he kept going with Obama's horrific war in Yemen, and so on and so forth. I could go with Abraham Accords, fast track.
I count sanctions, the aggressive use of economic sanctions as an act of war. How is the Trump administration attempting to infiltrate Venezuela, destroy economically, and replace Maduro? How is that not a war? You know what I mean? I understand that people have like a conventional understanding of like war. People mean spears, guns, killing each other. But there's a lot of ways of warfare. But I love your point. Please continue, Patrick. I just want to add that because I 100% agree.
Yeah, and Venezuela, 2 failed coups during his first term against Venezuela, 2 failed coups, and he had to drag out, you know, these sort of redundant neocons out of the crypt of Foggy Bottom in D.C. I think it was Elliot Abrams and John Bolton and a few others. Total failure. So, and again, sanctioning Venezuela, stealing the state assets of the state oil company Citgo, giving it to Juan Guaido, who is this sort of strange individual that's masquerading as president when he's in America or something strange, gets standing ovations in Congress, but that's not difficult because a lot of foreign people can come in and get lauded in our Congress these days. They give more standing ovations to foreign plants than they do their own leadership these days. But so this idea that Trump is a peace president, I think it's really unraveling quickly. And it's very dangerous what he's doing with Iran, because Iran they're in compliance with the non-proliferation treaty, which they're signatory to, but they don't have to follow it. The United States is threatening them with annihilation because Trump's own nuclear doctrine, here's an important detail. It has, for a preemptive strike for Iran, Trump's own doctrine stipulates low-yield nuclear, tactical nuclear, bunker-busting, ground-penetrating bombs. So that's a preemptive nuclear strike he's threatening on Iran. No one's talking about that, but that's what it is. So why? What does Iran have? Where's the evidence for the weapons? This is like Back to the Future, 2002. 2002, we've got an accusation of WMDs, we've got no evidence, and we've got threats. Now, why would Iran want to play ball with America? Because their next door neighbor is a country called Iraq. And the Iraq allowed U.S. weapons inspectors in. They did the whole song and dance. They didn't find anything, and they said, "Well, we're gonna bomb you into the Stone Ages. We're gonna invade you and occupy you for 10 years anyway." Why on earth would Iran want to comply with or cooperate or trust the United States? Its record is so bad right now. Yep. So I don't blame them. And so even the Iranians were thinking, they have a fatwa from their previous supreme leader, that they wouldn't be pursuing nuclear weapons as a religious national issue. They've just announced this week, their spokesperson, senior advisor, has said that they're prepared to reverse that policy if the United States continues to threaten them with annihilation. So the U.S. is in violation of the UN Charter by threatening to attack somebody. It's against international law. But the U.S. doesn't really abide by international law, yet they're wanting to impose it on Iran from their interpretation of the non-proliferation treaty. So I mean, it's just that's just the beginning. The other thing is they want to bomb them for weapons they don't have or that they might have. But who has weapons in the Middle East? Israel. Exactly. Israel has a full nuclear arsenal. So how can you even begin to have this conversation and demand of anybody to abide by, to comply, to show accountability, whatever, when the person right across the way, the one that's actually Iran's not a security threat to America. It's perceived as a threat to Israel. That's not a threat to U.S. national security. That's a threat to Israel. Okay, so any attack by the U.S. is on behalf of Israel. So they're protecting someone with an undeclared nuclear arsenal from any accountability, who's in the international courts of justice for genocide and whose prime minister is a warrant out for his arrest with the International Criminal Court. The whole picture is diabolical. But this is what's passing for foreign policy in Washington right now. I didn't think it could get worse with Biden, but it just might be getting worse. Honestly, it's the potential is a potential disaster on the horizon.
Yeah, that's the peace through strength mantra that Trump repeats. And I don't know why that alone didn't raise red flags, because that's Ronald Reagan ideology. Like, Trump wasn't even pretending to come up with anything new. He was the one who advocated for a hard line stance against Iran, a policy that Joe Biden doubled down on. And what's the crazy thing, because you mentioned how we're fighting and we're provoking war with Iran on behalf of Israel. The wild thing is that Iran is not even a threat to Israel. Like, Iran has mostly been a paper tiger when it comes against the Zionist regime. Iran is just in the way of the greater Israel project. Doesn't that reveal how crazy the Zionist regime actually is? Then they take people who the United States and Israel invaded. I know you want to try not pass right to you, but you have Syria and Lebanon. These are places who've been victims of Israeli, United States war crimes, sanctions. Then they resist the United States and Israeli regime because I don't separate them. So they resist the regime. We label them terrorists, and then we pin their actions on Iran. They said these people are only acting on behalf of Iran. They are Iranian proxies. As if someone in Syria, as if someone in Lebanon needs another country to tell their patriots to fight against an occupying regime. Now think about how ridiculous that is. Imagine if China had United States troops going down Madison Square Garden or something. They were occupying Las Vegas. You had an active occupation by the Chinese Communist Party, stealing water supplies, and then the Americans, rightfully so, take up arms and attack the Chinese government, who is sending military people to occupy our country. How crazy would it be if China turned around and said, oh my God, these Americans are only acting on behalf of the orders of the UK? Like, no, they're attacking them because they're occupying their land. Guys, that is the situation in Syria. But go ahead, Patrick. I know you want to talk about it.
And not only that, they would call them terrorists. They would say, those American terrorists, look at them. Look at them. We're going to designate them as a terrorist group. Ergo, we have carte blanche to bomb, Brooklyn and Queens into the Stone Ages, and any civilian casualties are just unfortunate collateral damage in the war against our terrorism, because we don't feel. I mean, it is kind of ridiculous, but you just have to put the shoe on the other foot for a moment to see how stupid the whole thing is. But the other thing, anybody who attacks Israel or who tries to defend themselves against Israel is automatically labeled a terrorist. Anybody who opposes Israeli occupation is labeled a terrorist. And I'll put one more on top of that. Anybody who actually fights ISIS is labeled a terrorist by the US, by the UK, by the European minion states. And that's kind of how it goes. So that means they can, what they've done, why this is particularly insidious, the UN recognizes the Qassam brigades and the PIJ and all these Palestinian armed resistance groups. The UN international law recognizes them as an armed liberation struggle, like they did the ANC in apartheid South Africa. But the United States and its allies have a domestic designation of terrorism. So they're protected under international law and according to international treaties and agreements and resolutions historically. But the United States, Israel, and its allies have clumped together to bypass that normal international legal definition to create their own definition to justify, at the moment, a genocide against the native Palestinian population. So the whole thing is so twisted, and you have people in America, particularly on the right or Fox News audience and stuff like that. They're saying, well, they deserve it because they're allowing Hamas to use them as human shields, and after all, there are no innocent people in Gaza. They're terrorist sympathizers, or they're terrorists, and it's unfortunate, but they, we had no choice but to kill them. They got in the way of the bombs, so that's the attitude right now in America, and I think it's at a low ebb morally, very corrupt. I think the political system's been corrupted, and I think the public has been corrupted by propaganda and just massive, I don't know, a lot of brainwashing and conditioning over the years has got people to the point where they're experiencing a kind of mass cognitive dissonance on some of these issues, and then hence they becoming very compliant to other threats, like threats of legal threats or whatever. If you're criticizing Israel, a lot of people are complying with this out of just pure fear.
Yeah.
Because they have been conditioned to get to this point. You couldn't have got America to that point 10 years ago. It's a specific time with a specific set of conditions that's unique to this point in America. And also, I would say, extend that to, Germany. It's particularly bad there now with the
Germany's
censorship.
a straight up police state with no free speech.
Yeah, it's really
horrific.
bad.
They not only copy Trump's policies, they doubling down what they say. They're just revoking citizenship. Trump is mostly threatening people who have green cards and who are migrant. They said, no, we don't give a fuck. We will literally, if you have a second nationality, we will revoke your shit if you oppose Israel. It's crazy. And considering the United States is supporting Netanyahu, and as you said before, they're smearing the international criminal courts. They are shielding and protecting people who literally protested for the right to rape Palestinians to death. There's a very infamous, I think it's like a Signal chat group. They have all these. Well, there's a lot of them that they have where there's like hundreds of thousands of these Israelis that post pictures of dead Palestinian children, and they cheer it on. And their position is, and I screenshotted someone who was saying this on my timeline literally just today, where they said, well, of course we're going after the children. They're future terrorists. Of course we use starvation as a tool of war. We're fighting against terrorists. And I've seen this playbook my entire life. You guys see how they label their enemies as a terrorist. And once they do that, you lose all the rights that the state agreed upon. So we had the Geneva Conventions, we had genocide conventions, and we put rules on how you engage in war. No bombing hospitals. Israel is taking that off the table now. No use of starvation as a tool of war, but they take that off the table now. Why are they allowed to do that? Because they are labeled as a terrorist. So how is it in our interest? And this is because as humanity, we're supposed to evolve. We accepted this for a long time, but it's time to evolve. How is it in our interest to allow a group of genocidal members of the ruling class, give them the unique ability to label who is a terrorist or not? Now, if you're on the right and you believe that the government has the right to label someone as a terrorist, thus they lose all their rights. Why do we even have a Second Amendment? Why you might as well turn your guns away, because they can just label you as a terrorist and you don't have a Second Amendment no more. You have no due process. But Patrick, go ahead. I'm enjoying this conversation.
Yeah, no, they extend that to the First Amendment, because what they're doing now and what they've done, which is disingenuous, very dishonest, and very deceitful, in fact, is they're labeling student protesters as terrorist supporters, or calling, that's why they use the term pro-Hamas, even though none of the students are there to support Hamas. They couldn't care less. They're there as human rights supporters. They're there to support the Palestinian people. They're there to oppose the genocide and calling for Israel to stop killing. They're anti-war protesters effectively, but they've been recast intentionally and deceitfully by people like Marco Rubio, by politicians, by the media, and they've done this, and by the Republican, a lot of neocons in the Republican Party, and just really just stupid congressmen and senators. Really, like, these are low IQ. They've really shown their stripes on this, and so they've done that because then they can extend the terrorism, almost like the elasticity of the terrorism inference. They can use that to cancel the First Amendment or to nullify the First Amendment, because if they're terrorist supporters, they really don't deserve First Amendment protection. And in America, that's a huge thing, because all of the rights stem from the First Amendment. If you lose the First Amendment, you lose everything below that. So that's why it should be sacrosanct. And for Republicans of all people, and people in the the MAGA movement who claim they were victims of this cancellation policy under the left, under Biden, and not having free speech on campuses, and Ben Shapiro raging against trans women, and the real tough guy protests there opposing the woke, real tough. Now they're the snowflakes. And this is the true woke right. This is the true woke right. This is identity politics on steroids. And they're willing to take away the rights, the First Amendment right of all Americans to protect against criticism of a foreign government. Not even America. They won't deport you if you post or criticize the US government. But if you criticize Israel, who's in the dock of the International Criminal Court for genocide, if you actually criticize what they're doing, you get deported or canceled or branded a terrorist sympathizer. It is so corrupt. This is so corrupt. The backlash of this is going to go so deep in America. It's going to make all of the division and partisan division that you see now. This is going to exacerbate things on such a deep tremor, such a deep level. And it's not come yet. It will come, though. And it's not helping. But until a leader arrives who has a set of balls, who can call this out for what it is, instead of they're all basically simping to the Israeli lobby, it's kind of pathetic. But until a leader, on the Democrat or Republican, shows up and says, this is utterly ridiculous. Look at what we're doing. We're destroying our own principles. We're meddling with we're allowing a foreign lobby to basically meddle with our First Amendment. On behalf of who? How do we benefit from this? We don't. It's absolute manipulation, skullduggery, and political witchcraft. And they're running a witch hunt against people because their thoughts are impure regarding the state of Israel. It's ridiculous. Everybody should be open to criticism. As far as governments go, 110%. That's like the only thing that's this. What attraction is there to America if there's no First Amendment? There's none. There is none.
They claim we don't have the right to have a First Amendment, that we're anti-Semitic, and we oppose the existence of the state of Israel, for example. They say you're anti-Semitic. And I really need people to wake up here, because you understand that we have the right to oppose the existence of states, right? Yeah. I don't agree with the idea of a theocracy.
No state has the right to exist. No state, and states do not have rights to exist. Yeah. Their existence is dependent on two things: the acceptance of their neighbors, of how they're behaving, and the acceptance of the people living within their borders. That's who decides whether a state has a right to exist. It doesn't have an inherent inalienable right. It's not an individual. It's a construct. It's a construct. And if you look at history, states that run pogroms, states that run apartheid, states that run concentration camps, states that engage in civil warfare, they normally break up. They normally fall apart. They collapse, they disintegrate, or they get pummeled by their neighbors eventually. That's what's happening to Israel, and it's what will continue to happen to it. The bloodless, painless solution would be for international community to sanction Israel, to sanction it. And that's how you would transform it very quickly. But they won't do that. Instead, they're sanctioning all the poorest countries on the planet who are trying to oppose Israel. The whole thing is completely upside down right now. Yeah. I don't think, looking back at history, it's like you can look at the Second World War and say, oh, how horrible, everything was there in Italy, Nazi Germany, etc. But the level of international corruption politically, it's much higher now. This is on another level. It's way beyond World War II. Way, way, way beyond.
That's such a great point, because the ruling class learned from their mistakes. The same way that we have theory, the ruling class has their own version of theory, how to rule over the masses. They study kings who fall. They study empires who fall. And then the modern ruling class, for example, they like, why would our previous generation of the ruling class keep armed resistance on the table because the previous generation of the ruling class, who have a lot of flaws, they're like, hey man, we think we should have arms. You should have the right to uprise against a tyrannical state, so we're gonna have the Second Amendment. The current generation of the ruling class looked at that, they're like, you guys are out of your goddamn mind, so we're gonna take that away. So no armed resistance. Armed resistance is now off the table. The motherfuckers who thought of that, it's crazy. You guys see how many governments that have been overthrown by the masses. So this is the ruling class theory. They learn from their mistakes. They realize that the peasantry having too much freedom of thought is what led to many socialist uprisings, so many ruling classes being threatened. They see so many uprisings. They're like, hell no, we can't allow people to accept the reality of armed resistance. We have to completely take that off the table. And how is that in our benefit to allow the ruling class to have the power to take armed resistance? That's why I love talking to conservatives, by the way. I love talking to people on the right on Twitter, because I always say, if you think that Hamas are terrorists and you think these people are evil for defending themselves, you might as well give up your guns, because the ruling class have officially turned your guns into nothing but toys. Yeah. In order to protest against our government, we have to get permission, and they call it a permit. Like a protest with the permission of the government is a prep rally, but that's commonplace. It's commonplace. So your toys are nothing but guns. You got to ask the government for permission, and that's the ruling class engaging in never-ending class war of taking rights back, and they will always continue to take right backs without class struggle. Correct? But anyway, very thought-provoking conversation, Patrick. Something else I want to get to, because we mentioned the existence of states, and you nailed it earlier. I would love to chime more on this, because I talk about this. And if you study history, you will know how much of a fascinating conversation it is, what it means to be a state, what it means to have the right to exist. Now, I will add to what you said, because once again, I think you was on point. There is a simple reality that obviously you can have the will of the people. That was like, you see, like religion often was used as a way to control the masses, to create the validity of the state. That's why the church played a big role. The people thought that kings was holy. Like, this is, you guys see how much the proletariat evolved. We don't think like that no more, but they was able to trick the proletariat in England and Europe for a long time to support the legitimacy of the state, because they thought the king was God ordained, right? So you can have the support of the masses, but if you don't have the support of the masses, there is another way to have a legitimate state. It's very uncomfortable, but you can rule with an iron fist. There was a lot of Chinese states in the Middle Ages that was pretty harsh on the peasantry, that ruled with an iron fist. You have a lot of Mongolian societies that rule with an iron fist. They just had an overwhelming military that was gangster as fuck. And if you spoke out, they had all these crazy ways of torturing people, so they rule with iron fist. Now let's look at Israel. Israel is not a state like that. Israel is not strong enough to maintain their existence through the brute force, because unfortunately that's a lot of states existed that way. Israel relies on us. They rely on United States taxpayer money. They rely on our hard-working money to finance their security, because Israel cannot protect themselves without help of the West. So me, as a patriot, as someone who actually want my taxpayers' money to support my neighbors, I don't want that. And my thing is, if you can't support yourself without stealing our taxpayer money, without blackmailing our politicians, you don't deserve to exist. And I'm sorry if that makes me anti-Semitic. I don't believe that Israel deserves to exist, because I don't want my taxpayer money funding a theocracy. How is that unreasonable? How is that something I'm not have the right to say? But according to the United States government, I am supportive of Hamas. And I am rightful to have my rights taken away, because I am calling for the destruction of Israel, because I don't believe that we should be spending a large amount of our money on their defense, which is the only legitimacy that they have to exist, because they are an apartheid regime that relied on genocide and the Nakba to form their state. Well, I can go on this all day, because I love the path you take there. Patrick, I'll pass it to you before I have a few things I want to cover. Any other thoughts rolling in your head? Anything you want to cap this conversation on with before I get to an official topic here?
Sure. Yeah, you're right. There's a bunch of things you could say about this. I mean, one of them is that Israel requires the United States to be in all of those positions in Syria, in the Mediterranean, Cyprus, in the Gulf, in Bahrain, in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia. They have bases. The UAE, they have bases. They've got facilities, joint bases in Oman. They've got a base in Djibouti. They've stolen part of Yemen, the island of Socotra. They've got facilities, bases, and a navy, and so forth. They require all of that to provide Israel with a security envelope. And we saw that twice last year when Iran sent salvos of drones and missiles into Israel. You saw that activated the U.S. security umbrella, basically. They need all of that, and Jordan, and Syria illegally, and Turkey. They need all of that to protect this strip of land that's not as big as New Jersey, okay? That's a nuclear state, okay? So that all of that for Israel. What does the U.S. get in return for that? What benefit does the United States get? Nothing. The only benefit is ancillary benefit for those people invested in the defense industry. We don't necessarily need or buy very much petroleum from the Middle East. There is the petrodollar, of course, that is important for floating the value of the US dollar as a world reserve currency. But it just shows you the level, that the cost of maintaining that sort of trust fund baby in the Middle East. It's too much. You know, it's not only that, it's bleeding us and the region dry. It's causing untold war and conflict, death and destruction, destroying the world heritage that's there little by little. It's all being destroyed by Israel and by these conflicts and by ISIS, which have the full support and backing. I don't care what anybody says, has the full support and backing of Israel, and indirectly the United States for that matter. So this is the sort of state of play, and yeah, I wouldn't call it a theocracy, because a lot of the leading Zionists and most Zionists in Israel identify as non-religious. So
yeah, that's a good point.
It has the veneer of a theocracy with religious symbolism on the flag, but in a real sense, it's a nationalist, an ethno-nationalist construct, but it's not even a very good ethno-nationalist identity. It's because it's all over the place. The whole thing is a mess, and it's a disaster that was created by the British, handed to the Americans to be the custodian of after the Suez Crisis in the mid-1950s. And the United States has been Israel's keeper in the region. It played a very important role for the U.S. during the Cold War. But then something happened, and the relationship took a very bad turn with the presidency of John F. Kennedy. That's when the U.S.-Israeli relationship took a very dark turn. Because Kennedy wanted Israel to sign the non-proliferation treaty with nuclear weapons, and Israel said, no, you can't touch or look at our nukes, and Kennedy ends up getting shot, and then that was the last we heard of Israel, Israeli nukes after that. So you can't have this a nuclear armed, backed by the world superpower in the Middle East. It's just not sustainable. The whole thing is not sustainable, and a lot of people are afraid that Israel would rather see the world burn in World War III than to try to resolve some of these deep issues for the benefit of everybody in the region and not just themselves. So that's the challenge that we face. Yeah,
very, very well said. I agree with everything you said. And there's another comment here: Zionism is not a Jewish project, and I absolutely love that framing. I actually really do. I like to keep multiple thoughts in my head at the same time, because I love when people will say to me like, "Oh, Nick, you don't think a Jewish state should exist?" I'm like, I don't generally think that, and it's right not to think that. Like, I don't have the ability to stop like a Muslim country from existing. You know, I have nothing to do with that, right? But if I'm paying the taxes, like I'm like, no, I don't want that shit to be. But it is a great point, and it is important to remember that it's an imperialist project first and foremost. They never ever buy, and there's a reason why. Like for example, Pete Hegseth got that tattoo. I think it was I don't remember exactly, but it like said something like a fear, like non-believer, like a diss against Muslims.
Infidel. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a reason why they make it everything about religious struggle. There's a reason why America has been brainwashed to hate Muslims. There's a reason why it's about religion, because they had to make it about religious struggle. They had to blind people into thinking about religious texts instead of the issue of colonialism, the issue of what is legal on behalf of international law and what is not. So they distract people with, oh, the Jewish people deserve to live there, the Muslim want to murder everybody, and then you turn your brain off and you go down the Zionist rabbit hole, which many evangelical Christians have done. But Patrick, I think you want to chime in. I'll give you another word before I move on.
No, that's I think I don't have much more to say specifically on the issue other than, you know, it's an unfortunate situation that we have the answers to. We have the answers to the situation, and the answers are, everyone has had these answers for decades, but the implementation of it has been another matter. And so we continue on, and here we are now facing on the precipice of World War III by, you know, attacking Iran over a nuclear issue. Now it's a perfect time, Nick, for Iran and the international community to demand Israel declare its nukes. Israel must show transparency. And then the Iranians will be happy to join a new agreement of no nukes in the region, but Israel has to be part of that agreement. So either both have nukes, Israel and Iran, like Pakistan and India, or neither have nukes. And if you put it up to vote in the region, they would be unanimous that nobody should have nukes in the region. I guarantee that.
Sorry to interrupt, but another thing I want to bring up regarding the Iranian nuke conversation is, you guys realize the whole thing about Iranian pursuing nukes has just been a talking point that neocons use to justify aggression against Iran. There are many religious people in Iran, and this including many religious leaders, who are ideologically opposed to the idea of having nukes. They believe it's blasphemy.
It's law. It's a religious law. There are no nuclear weapons in Iran. There was a fatwa passed by the previous supreme leader. However, they're a nuclear threshold state, which means that if they choose to, they can assemble a nuclear weapon within weeks. So, and they've said they don't want to. They have no intention to. But if the U.S. keep threatening them, they will have no choice but to.
And you'll be stupid not to do that. Like,
well, look at North Korea. Like, no one's messing with North Korea. So,
you read my mind.
Yeah, you know, so it can go either way, but it can't be like it is now. That's the problem. You can't have some people with secret nukes and then demanding that everyone else not even have nuclear energy. That's just unacceptable.
Yeah, I just want to bring that up because if you watch nothing but Fox News and right-wing media, you would think that Iran is full of people that are like, I just can't wait to nuke the fucking Jews. I can't wait to get a fucking nuke. And the idea that they present to people that they just too incompetent, they're like, man, they would love to have a nuke. The Iranian scientists, they're just too stupid to do it. And they will want to present this idea that Iran just these blood. That's why I always want to bring that up, because I think we should humanize the quote-unquote enemies of the United States. Iran is being forced to be in this position. North Korea didn't get nuked because they want to nuke people. They did for their self-defense. And that's 100% fucking rational to me. But I'll move on to a few quick topics here. I don't want to keep you too much longer. Very thought-provoking conversation. It was great to have you on, Patrick. But I want to cover a few quick things and some MAGA cope from right-wing influencers as well. So I think it's funny because now a lot of the people who are cowards, you know what I mean? It's pretty hard to build a platform being post-duopoly, not picking one team and riding the coattails of that one team. That would like Kyle Kalinske do. That would the Vanguard do. And they realize they failed. They're not interesting. They're not smart. They're deeply unserious. So they pick a team. You know what I mean? That's the Hodge twins. Like, you guys know how much fucking dough I'll be rolling in if I came on live and like, man, don't you know that the best thing for black people, we vote for Donald Trump. And we vote for Donald Trump and we make America great again, nigga. I will have 500,000 subscribers. That's the easy way. So I'm talking about. I'm previewing what I'm gonna get to.
Yeah, just get a red hat. Just get a red hat and do the whole thing, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, look at Nick Cruz. He's one of us. MAGA all the way. Hey, you know, loads of followers and subs."
Yeah, and me and Patrick, we don't take the easy way out. You gotta criticize and be legitimate and honest to the working class people that listen to your show. And there are a lot of people who told the working class that Donald Trump is a peace candidate, that Donald Trump is going to liberate the working class. And now they're backtracking. Like, there are people that are like, oh, man, Donald Trump will never start a war with Iran. Wait. Hold that thought. I'm going to get to that soon, because we're going to show you guys what Donald Trump is doing. This is the latest massacre, tragedy that Israel normally. If this happened in any other fucking individual war ever, It will be a game changer in terms of PR. But this is just another fucking day for Israel now. They took paramedics, aid workers, handcuffed them, shot them point blank in the head and the chest, and buried them. And we found another mass grave. Once again, just another day. Just another day for Israel here. And Patrick, feel free to chime in. I'm just trying to see how much I can cover here real quick. Feel free to chime in if you want to. But here's the response of the Trump administration. The response of the United States and the Donald Trump administration is to blame Hamas for Israel committing one. If it wasn't for Israel, it would be one of the most grotesque war crimes in the modern age. But it's just typical Israeli shit. But here the Trump administration, the U.S. State Department blames Hamas for the IDF killing 15 medic and aid workers.
Can tell you that for too long, Hamas has abused civilian infrastructure, cynically using it to shield themselves. Hamas's actions have caused humanitarians to be caught in the crossfire. The use of civilians or civilian objects to shield or impede military operations is itself a violation of international humanitarian law. And of course, we expect all parties on the ground to comply with international humanitarian law.
But it's specifically a question on it's a question about accounting and accountability, given that may have been.
So essentially her answer is Israel is allowed to do whatever they want because they're fighting quote unquote terrorists. We just had a great philosophical conversation about why that's dangerous. You guys see why. If you're fighting terrorists, you're allowed to execute ambulances. And you have, and I'm just quickly covering many things that have been going on in the last few weeks. You have Israel and it's been going on for months. I've reported on this, using Palestinians as human shields, a war crime, the same thing they say Hamas is guilty of doing. So they will take Palestinians on the street. They will kidnap Palestinians without due process. Something that Trump loves, the lack of due process, right? So they will kidnap Palestinians off the street, and then when entering buildings, they will send Palestinians out first, just in case there are any booby traps, just in case any Palestinian who's armed, any Hamas member is jumpy, they will shoot the Palestinian instead of the Israeli. Something, once again, the ruling class and previous generations said was a war crime. Our generation of the ruling class said, nah, you guys are crazy for taking out the table. So we are allowed to use human shields. So right now, you have the Trump administration that is enabling genocide, the use of human shields, the use of mass rape, the execution of journalists. And then last, I'll pass to you, Patrick. I have just a few things to share. I'll pass it right to you. But in this, I did a hotspot on this last week. More journalists have been killed in this conflict than every war combined over the last few decades. Like even when you look at World War I and World War II, it pales in comparison to the amount of journalists that Israel has murdered. And this is done under Donald Trump. You have Donald Trump endorsing pro-genocide candidates. And this, I don't buy the MAGA rebellion against Israel because you have this guy, Randy Fine.
Fine, yeah.
Who just won this election. Patrick, do you want to try? I know I'm doing a long.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah. Gloating over dead children. Disgusting comments made by this guy, Randy Fine. How could anyone, whether they're conservative or liberal, whatever, Christian or whatever, how can you vote for somebody that acts like that publicly? It's a little bit dark, actually. There he is. Yeah, I mean,
pro-life. This is the pro-life movement cheering on the death of Palestinian children.
Yep,
that's the fraudulent, fake pro. Like, it's just so disgusting. It's hard to even put words to it. Like, there's so many tweets I could show you guys, but I don't want to dwell in this.
Yeah, I bookmarked a bunch of Randy Fine. I probably have about 20 of these tweets, and each one is more disgusting than the next. So it's kind of shameful that Elon was boosting him, and all these conservative influencers are saying, and that's from me, somebody who is, more on the conservative side of the paradigm. These people are just bereft of any morals or ethics, or just no situational awareness of how they're coming off to the general population. They're in their own little world. And it is also the fake The one thing that's really becoming common is this fake Christian virtue signaling. They're talking about Christian values. Well, we all know good, pious Christians, and they don't behave or talk or carry on like this, okay? And so that part of using religion to extol one's political virtues is kind of a new trend that's becoming more prevalent under Trump, which I find to be very hypocritical.
Kill them all, said
Yeah.
pro-life Randy Fine.
Bombs away. Hashtag no mercy.
I'm scared to even show the first one. I don't want to get my YouTube channel pulled. I want to quickly go by it, but there's a dead
one
body
right there. Look at that one. Yeah.
I gotta be careful showing the first one because I don't want to get my channel fucked up. But there's a picture of a dead child, and he says, "Great pic, great quality." Yeah. Literally seeing dead children. Like, this is the greatest evil in humanity right now, the modern Nazis. There's a lot of evil out there. But what's worse than this? There's no suffering adequate for these animals. May the streets of Gaza overflow with blood. This guy just got elected. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, there's no lower. You can't go. There's no floor beyond this. This is about as low as you can go in terms of depravity and making public statements. There's nothing worse than publicly advocating to slaughter children. It's just like pretty bad, you know. And what's worse is that, are there any Democrats calling this out?
Nope. Cory Booker did a 24-hour filibuster speech where he said nothing about Israeli war crimes. No, nothing about the anti-Semitic hoax using the crackdown. Nothing. Literally,
you know
nothing
why?
about that.
Do you know why? Because
Absolutely.
when Cory Booker was coming up through the political ranks early in his career, the talent spotters from the Israeli lobby saw him, and Rabbi Shmuley was dispatched to be like super glue on Cory Booker, and he's still stuck to Cory Booker, Rabbi Superglue. He hasn't managed to shake him yet.
Rabbi Superglue.
So
I just want to know, and big shout out to Wyatt Reed, friend of the show, who highlighted it. Let me share screen. A coincidence that Cory Booker.
There he is. Yeah.
Rabbi has notes on Cory Booker's 25. So the 25-hour speech, Rabbi Shmuley had a part of it. Who's close to Cory Booker apparently. And this is the question I asked under his tweet. And this is what, like, apparently you're anti-Semitic if you ask these questions. Like, you gotta know Rabbi Shmuley sells sex toys. No shade, right? You get a hustle, you get your hustle, whatever. But this guy sells sex toys. But despite that, he's just some creepy fuck rabbi who sells sex toys. He's close with all these world leaders.
He's more than he's not just any creepy rabbi. He is he's a major operative. He's sent to as a handler to deal with people and to handle people.
Anti-Semitic. That's an anti-Semitic trope.
Well, it's kind of obvious. I mean, he stuck. Yeah. He attached himself to Michael Jackson. He attached himself to Tulsi Gabbard. He's attached himself to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. All the famous high-profile people, you'll find him. And one way or another, he's going to attach himself there. And what he does is basically kind of coerces them to make Israel their most important issue. And he's like maybe a crude metaphor, but I call him the Al Sharpton of Zionism, basically.
I think that's perfect.
He is the ultimate race hustler, ethno hustler, political hustler. He's there to brigade. He's to get people to brigade them, to get them to brigade, and to get them to take the Israel issue as their number one issue. And if they don't, he will come after them. He'll come after whatever their interests are. So they have to all be worried, like, oh my gosh, there he is. Oh shoot, am I okay with the lobby? Okay, oh my God, did I say the right thing? So it makes people kind of second guessing where their positions are. He absolutely, whether he's on the payroll or not, he works for the Israeli lobby, unofficially or not. He does work. He's an unofficial or official, who knows, but he is an asset of that lobby, 110%.
And the thing is, and the reason why I was joking earlier, just noticing this, just a few years ago, what you call it anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. It's crazy. Like I'm looking back on my life, like looking back at everything that's been messaged to us. It's crazy how they managed to convince like boomers and late Gen Xers that noticing the obvious about Zionist influence. You have Gal Gadot, who's the worst actress of all fucking time. The worst actress of all time getting all these roles, but if you mention Zionist influence in Hollywood, they would have murdered you just a few years ago in terms of public opinion. But Patrick, I think you want to chime in for free.
No, I'm just saying, isn't this nothing to do with religion or Jewish religion? He is a political activist and a hustler. And just like all good hustlers, he knows who to get in the photo frame with, and then he uses his political network, or people use him in order to leverage people for clout, for support, for bandwagoning. This is just straight up street politics, basically. And so yeah, it's not nothing to do with religion or race or anything like that. It's just pure street politics.
Well said. Well said. And this is a big shout out to Greg. Once again, this guy who helps me on my hotspot videos. The universal symbol for your compromise.
Yeah, right.
And they will have you believe, and I'm mostly having fun here, but they will have you believe that this random rabbi who sells sex toys just so happened to know these world leaders, and there's nothing nefarious going on.
Yeah,
Again, they will crucify you as a conspiracy theorist if you was on CNN, Patrick. They will crucify you, but this is just common sense to us. But go ahead, Patrick.
They're all train wrecks. Look at Russell Brand; he's a mess.
Yep.
Zelensky, disaster. What's that? Roseanne Barr, or at the bottom there, I can't. One of them, one of those celebrities from the 80s.
I actually don't know who the one at the bottom is.
I think it's Roseanne Barr, and the Russell Brand, bottom row middle is Russell Brand, then Zelensky, and and then Cory Booker. The Cory Booker is actually, to me, the most interesting of all. Okay, because Cory Booker had a promising political career when he was younger. Okay, so but he has absolutely been captured by the lobby early in his career, so he has no latitude on foreign policy at all. So, and this is what happened with the Democratic Party. They got to pretty much everybody, save for maybe one or two. And on the Republican side, maybe Thomas Massie, Ron Paul, and a couple of others. Besides that, everybody has been booked and reserved.
I'm old enough to remember when they said Cory Bush was going to be the next Barack Obama. I remember when he was like the young up-and-coming senator. He was one of the people I knew back in even my Democrat shit-lib days. I was like, oh, man, that Cory Booker guy, he might be the next Obama. I remember that guy. He's been so thoroughly exposed as corrupt. He just relies on the fact that we are a capitalist dictatorship. Big money keeps him in charge. But everyone knows that he's a shill. He did this 25-hour stunt, and literally no one cares.
What was it about? Do you know what it was about?
It was a 25-hour Trump derangement syndrome speech.
Oh, it was on Trump.
Elon Musk derangement syndrome. It's literally a non-story that the media is trying to make a thing. But you have Cory Booker, and I showed this yesterday while I'm trying to find this receipt.
By the way, Shmuley also attached himself to Elon Musk. Okay, Elon's not
compromised.
Yeah, Elon Musk is not in that montage, but trust me, Superglue has velcroed himself to Elon as well. And by the way, I want to say that one of the most greatest canards of them all is the idea that's been created that Elon Musk is a champion of the working class. Literally, the richest man in the world, is being characterized as the working class champion. Now, tell me, is the ultimate psyop has arrived? You can't do any better than that. You can't do any better.
That's exactly what no class analysis does to a population. That's what happened. I want to show this because Candace Owens, I have a lot of funk with her. I got a lot of beef with her, and she have covered the Palestinian issue pretty well, but she still maintains the veneer of Trump. Now we get into the part of the segment I hinted at earlier, where you have these MAGA influencers that are in full-fledged cult mode. Look, this is who President Trump just endorsed for office. This is absolutely appalling and revealing as to who is in charge in the White House. Candace Owens, Donald Trump is in charge.
That's
Stop
right.
infantizing him. Candace Owens keep doing this thing where she's infantizing. Oh my
Yeah.
God, Donald Trump, he's being manipulated. Now
Right.
I hope we were smart in here. I hold two thoughts at once. I think it's good that she's doing this little tepid call out, but she's playing the game too. Like
Nick,
she's
go
ahead.
Honest with you, when I saw that tweet, I retweeted that maybe, I think. When I first read that first part, when she said who is in charge in the White House, what registered in my brain was Donald Trump immediately. Yeah. So I almost thought when I read that, I'm like, wow, this is a big one for Candace. It was a big one. So I even convinced myself that she was saying Trump. That's why I retweeted it. That's how desperate I was to see even her become like fully enlightened about the depravity of the situation. But you're right. That's not what she's alluding to. So she's basically fobbing it off. Someone's got to be the big boy and take ownership of the problem. So Trump, even Trump can't scapegoat the Israeli lobby forever. You know, he has to take responsibility. You know, Republicans got to take, because it could go south for Israel pretty badly. Like that could happen within a year or 2 years. What are they going to do? They're going to blame the lobby for the policies they themselves made. You know, the lobby's just there to throw money at them and push them and, you know, cajole them and threaten them and coerce them. But ultimately, it is the responsibility of the politicians to grow a pair. You know, It's just amazing.
Yeah, the infantizing of Donald Trump is a common propaganda technique the ruling class uses. They did, the liberal corporate media did to Kamala Harris all the time. The lowering the standard, treating them like children. And Candace Owens thinks she's slick. She and many other these MAGA influencers who have been right on Palestine, but I'm frustrated because it's not enough just to be right. I know RB, and I know we're assholes for this, but it's not enough for you just to be right. If you then point the working class of this country into the wrong direction and sheep herd working class people into the predatory hands of the capitalist class, you are accomplishing nothing in between. So if you like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, you might as well like Cenk Uygur. Because Cenk Uygur, he would say stuff like, I believe in free healthcare. He would say stuff that is objectively good. But the reason why we don't fuck with Cenk is because it doesn't matter what he says. The end goal is to sheep herd people into the vicious claws of the capitalist class, but on the Democratic side. And Candace Owens does it for the Republican side. So now what they're doing to rob the agency of these grown-ass men who made a calculated decision to sell out to the Zionist lobby for political power. They are presenting them as victims. So Candace Owens is saying RFK Jr. is a victim of blackmail.
Well, yeah, exactly. I was just gonna say, when I saw his picture come up, like he's a helpless kind of befuddled victim of a blackmail plot. He's the biggest philanderer going. He's used his privilege to rack up notches in his bedpost for his whole adult life, so much so that his previous wife committed suicide after discovering his conquest diary.
That's so dark.
I mean, but that's what you're dealing with someone like RFK, who, by the way, sworn his life allegiance to the state of Israel and are defending their genocide at every turn. I give Candace credit for red pilling on after October 7th. I think
of course.
She's done amazing to bring a lot of people through the woods on that issue. However, it's a good time for her to kind of go all the way rather than pull up short and still. I don't know. I think she'll ultimately. I have faith she'll ultimately get there, but there's been a lot of damage done with the astroturfing. Basically, It's good to see the Daily Wire collapse. That sort of fake.
Yeah, I vaguely read a few snippets about that. That's very interesting.
Here's another one. Ian Carroll. RFK is being blackmailed. We need to save RFK. I mean, this guy is so corrupt. RFK is so corrupt. It's not even funny. And RFK collapsed in front of the Senate hearings and basically said, I'll do a bird flu vaccine. I support the child vaccine schedule. All the things that he campaigned for his whole since COVID, he basically flipped and caved in front of after a little bit of pressure from the Senate. So there's not a person of principle. With a little bit of pressure, he will fold like a cheap deck chair. So it's like they've elevated him to this hero status, but he's been on Epstein's jet twice as well. So he's got issues. You know, he is not the right person to be like pouring your hope into.
He's our class enemy. And class warfare guides my politics. He's a millionaire Kennedy. The Kennedy clan is a clan full of Zionists. Like RFK has supported Israel his entire life in order to maintain access in his privileged class. But here's Ian Carroll, and every single person I'm showing you guys today are people that I called out, people who I have challenged to debates. Like people like, Nick, do you want to debate Dave? I'm like, yeah, I'm down. He's like, fuck that shit. I like, guys, I'm down to debate any of these people. They don't want the phone because I called these people out a long time ago. And I remember some people like, hey man, Nick, I think you've been too hard on Ian, man. Don't you know Ian? They call out Israel. No, he is a useful idiot to the Zionist regime. He is here to get people who are dissatisfied with the presence of Israel to support Donald Trump, a giant Zionist. At that point, that essentially erases. They don't care if you're upset as long as you enable their political power. So he's there to shepherd people to do that. So now, after it's obvious that he and his legitimacy is on the line, now that RFK Jr. as health secretary, his number one priority is to fight anti-Semitism. So Ian Carroll is doing damage control, and this tweet is beyond parody. My only goals are to decouple RFK Jr. from his blackmailers. They're there to save RFK, Patrick. They're here to save RFK from their blackmailers. He's the victim, guys. He's a victim. You know, America healthy again. But sorry, go ahead, Patrick. I'm sorry.
A part of what you're looking at here is basically clout worship. It's that you know, still want to maintain your connection to the clout of either RFK or people connected with RFK who are big influencers who can open doors and opportunities and financial benefits and so forth. So everybody's like, nobody wants to criticize Joe Rogan, even though he's got the lamest talk show on the internet. But nobody wants to criticize him, especially, you know, people that are like pundits like myself, because then that will disqualify you from ever being invited on his show, which then you could blow up your career. But so I have to say, should I fake it and say that he's really good and say that he's actually done anything like within a proximity of time of the actual issue rather than waiting 18 months to comment on it, which is what he normally does, which is freaking useless for the public. So do I pretend that he's doing a good job and hopes that I will be selected to be a guest on his show? Or do I just say what is the obvious truth, which is that it's a gatekeeping, a completely lame. It's like a mainstream media afternoon talk show for housewives. That's what the Joe Rogan
it's crazy. And you describe how the independent media scene is completely cut because it essentially became mainstream media. They replaced
it's totally cucked. There's the hierarchies. And then you see the cucking and the clout farming and the clout simping all on X. X is like the pinnacle of it because it's owned by somebody that everybody is sucking up to in hopes that they'll get a retweet from Elon Musk.
It's so pathetic.
Yeah, and so who's he retweeting? Tommy Robinson, all these degenerate nationalists, racists, people like that. That's basically what Elon Musk is boosting. People who publish fake news, people who publish fake tweets, people who steal other people's content and call themselves, you know, journalists. That's what Elon boosts, basically. So and he incentivizes. What's worse is Elon's algorithm incentivizes tweets that don't have hyperlinks to the source of the claim. So you get all these people breaking news and then a big headline and then some bullshit text with a JPEG image that was ripped off somewhere, and those go viral because Elon specifically designed the algorithm. He said publicly that we don't want to put external links in the tweets. So he incentivized the biggest fake news revolution in the internet's history. X is the number one source of fake news on the internet. And Elon says it's the number one news source He's
We're
constantly.
the media now.
We are the media. You're the media. Yeah, it's total bullshit. You know, I don't like the mainstream media. I think they're terrible, horrible, on especially on foreign policy issues. But they do also a lot of truthful reporting about a bunch of other things, and we can call out what's right and what's wrong. That's our role. But to say that Joe Rogan is going to replace the mainstream media is stupid, because Joe Rogan isn't going to be there at court cases at SDNY. He's not going to be there to cover press conferences. He's not putting transcripts out. The whole host of coverage that goes on all these different issues, from medical to lifestyle to education to this and that environment, not just politics and geopolitics. So Russell Brand and Joe Rogan aren't going to do that job. Okay, so Elon's basically saying, defund AP, defund Associated Press, defund Reuters. Reuters is all fake news. It's not all fake news. Elon's fortune relies on Reuters to report business trends and data that allow investors to invest in his stocks. So he's fully dependent on the mainstream media, but he's just trashing him to look good to a right-wing base that's shallow enough to believe that X is the sole source of truth in the world. It's just so ridiculous.
Yeah, X is such a it's a shithole. And people, if you're not on X, you don't realize how much fake news. Like, people will just post and they'll go viral. I have caught people, and there's a account I will call out. There's a big account called Bricks News, something like that.
Oh, that's terrible.
Where I caught them many times, because you guys know I do hotspot videos. So a lot of times in the morning I'll be doing research, and I always got to send links to my editor. So I would see someone say something. Like, you guys know how many times I catch people say fake shit. I would see someone say something like, "Oh man, that'd be a great video idea." I'll look into it. It'll be complete bullshit. And there's an account called like Bricks News that does that. There's all these right-wing accounts. Obviously, when it comes to Trump, it's straight up, it's horrible. Like, our friend Sarah from DD Geopolitics, big shout out to her. I'm not gonna read this whole thread, but she did a great thread where she just highlighted all the fake news stories that was put by the influencer crowd that Joe Rogan and Elon Musk put up. It's so hilarious. Like, and one of the first examples, just to give you an example of this very long thread she made, is the Epstein files. There's so many of these fake stories, fake accomplishments of Donald Trump that these people will just pop up. But another one who I called out just on the same topic regarding this influencer is Dave Smith. He's another guy I called out. People like, man, Nick, you just being an asshole. Who do you like, Nick? Because I was like, man, I am an aggressive third-party activist. Like, there's so many people who've been on third parties like, man, it's okay if you vote Democrat. I am not one of those third-party activists. I am one of them motherfuckers who actively advocate for people to lead the two-party duopoly. And if you don't, I'm hostile towards you. Like, I think third-party activists have been too docile. Like, you just accept people selling out the global working class. I'm not that kind of person, which leads to me lashing out on people like this. Unfortunately, that's the reason why the Bernie Sanders left hate me, because I found that to be unacceptable for you to vote for Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. The same way the people like Dave Smith have me on the blacklist. You will never see me on these people's shows, because I have aggressively called these people out for supporting Donald Trump and supporting the duopoly. And now, how long is the video? I don't know. I actually watched the video. How long is the video?
And there were
only 90 seconds. Essentially, Dave Smith said, if Donald Trump actually launches a war in Iran, not only will I not support it, I will apologize for the rest of my life for voting for that guy. And I know some people are like, oh man, that's pretty admirable for him to say. What I am saying, that's not enough, because this guy used a giant platform to mislead people into thinking that Donald Trump was anything else other than a Zionist puppet. And I called him out aggressively. Like, why are you telling people to an anti-war coalition to vote for Donald Trump? Oh, you motherfucking grifter. You don't know you say. You're just trying to be antagonistic. And now, months later, in order to save face, they did say, oh my God, I didn't know he was going to start a war with Iran. Anyway, Patrick, I'll pass to you. We can begin to wrap up soon. You guys see how they use this. They push storylines. We explained it before. It's a story they bring you on. The left does the same as well. They endorse John Fetterman. Then John Fetterman betrayed them, and they're like, "Oh my God, who could have seen that coming?" Then they endorse the next politician. They betrayed them. Oh my God, who could have seen that coming? It's a story that these content creators put you through, and and it's a cycle that repeats. But Patrick, I'll pass to you. I think I'm in my point.
my final comment, because I gotta get to
Yeah,
dinner.
we can wrap. Yeah, let's
I'm
wrap.
5 hours ahead of you, but yeah, Dave Smith, in all fairness, he he's been good on the anti-war and opposing October 7th and that sort of thing, but ultimately, and I compliment people for things I like, I criticize people for things I don't like, but ultimately, the real conversation is you got to sort of totally unhitch your wagon from the political gravy train. And to do that, you sometimes have to throw the whole thing under the bus. And I think the chuck wagon of MAGA deserves to be thrown under the bus, which is unfortunate, because it's only been like less than 90 days. And it's already a complete disaster. So and I think it's going to get worse, because listen to this. Trump won because he managed to convince enough blue dog Democrats and Rust Belt voters and working class new Republicans that he was going to improve their standard of living. Just that. And what we have now is runaway inflation. That's not changing. And people's standard of living is dropping, and people are taking out more personal debt on credit cards and loans and things like that. So this promise that he will benefit the working class, aside from the anti-woke thing that working class conservatives were extremely annoyed and pissed off with, okay, that's somewhat dealt with. But in terms of the economic question, there's going to be no improvement at all. Healthcare costs are not coming down. That's the last thing I'm gonna say is, if Elon is so freaking smart, why don't you go and tell us how to fix our healthcare system, which is the most overpriced on the planet, ripping everybody off from cradle to grave. It's one of the biggest organized theft operations you could possibly get. Why don't you, where are the geniuses? Where's Doge? Find a way to cut our healthcare monthly premiums in half, and then we'll talk. We'll talk about support. We'll be behind you. I'll go out and I'll be your biggest fan. You do that for the country, but I don't see them even touching the issue. They're afraid even to mention it, and that to me is one of the biggest betrayals of for people who can't afford that, who don't have a Tesla job that's paying out gold plate insurance policies for all their employees. Not everybody is so lucky to have that. Most people, it'll break them permanently and their families if anybody gets seriously injured or sick. And so that's an issue that Trump, every previous U.S. administration has tried to deal with healthcare. Even Hillary Clinton made it her big issue when she was first lady. So not all succeeded, but at least they tried. Donald Trump is a hands-off, laissez-faire policy. So that's one of the things I think is very telling about this working class kind of identity that MAGA is attempting to do. That is the number one issue for a lot of Americans I know, including myself and everybody in my family. It's that issue, and they don't even want to get their hands dirty with it. That should tell you a lot.
That's how I knew not to take the Make America Healthy Again movement when RFK Jr. spoke out against single-payer healthcare. But Patrick, thank you for your time. I know we had a long show, but it was a very thought-provoking conversation. I appreciate you joining me. Anything you want to plug and promote, make sure you guys follow Patrick. I was on your show before. He does great work, so make sure you guys follow him.
Yeah, I was on the previous TNT. I was on before, but it's 21stcenturywire.com. We got two shows, the Midweek Wire, the Sunday Wire, mostly international politics. So if you want to know what's going on in the Middle East and geopolitically, we're a pretty good destination for that. So tune in.
Well said. What's up, Patrick? Thank you guys for joining us. We had great back-to-back shows on my return with Alam Mizrahi and Patrick Henningsen. My hotspot brother, Nico House, it joined us on Friday. You already know, since I was back this week, I had to start this week with powerful guests. We already had a great start this week with Patrick and Alon. We had my boy Nico join us on Friday. I appreciate you guys for watching. It's time to rebuild the channel, man. I've been back. I've been away for a while, but it's time to rebuild the channel. Help us rebuild this. You know what I mean? Please share, like, recommend to your friends, support us on Patreon. Hope you guys enjoy these streams. RBN is the place where we're forming an anti-imperialist coalition in front. Open dialogue, no cancel culture, you will see a lot of different voices in Arabian. I hope you guys enjoy my shows. If you do, please like. Have a good one, guys. Take care.